Hi everyone, it's Natalie and welcome back to my channel. Today is finally the time to talk about my top 10 books of 2021. I am so excited to share these books with y'all. Let's be honest though, this list has been made in a moment of crisis because really, if I'm being honest, the truth of the matter is that about half of the books come from the first half of the year, and the first half of 2021 feels like it happened in 2020. So my memory is already foggy. And then the second half of 2021 feels like a fever dream. So all of my favorites feel like I'm making it up. So that's just the chaotic energy we're serving today, okay? I apologize in advance. Okay, so we're going to start with honorable mentions because, of course, I had to include them. So the first one is The Magic Fish. This is a middle grade graphic novel that is really, really beautifully designed, but also a beautiful story. I really enjoyed. It is about this Vietnamese American or Canadian, I can't remember, boy who is queer. He's getting ready to come out, but he's not sure it's the right time to come out because there has been a recent death in his family, and so he is dealing with this inner conflict about that. It's really an amazing, amazing story. And interwoven into the main narrative is also like a little fairy tale that I really enjoyed. So overall, I think it's just so worth the read. The second book that is an honorable mention is This Accident of Being Lost. Now, this one is a short story collection and a collection of songs. It is written by a First Nations author, and I cannot describe it to you. Let's just be completely honest and transparent. I cannot describe it to you, but it has a lot to do with calling out racism. It's about land. It's about decolonization. It is about many, 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 many things. And it is one of those books that I read it twice this year because upon my first read, I was like, this is definitely the kind of book you have to reread in order to fully get it. And by now, I have forgotten most of it, but that is not because the book is not good. That is because my memory is not good. So I'm really looking forward to getting a physical copy of this book so that I can reread it and continue to pull out more things out of these stories because they are phenomenally written, and they're just packed with just so much richness. Definitely worth the read. And then the third and final honorable mention is A Dowry of Blood. Now, in this one, we follow this woman who is in this toxic relationship with Dracula, but Dracula is never called by name. And so we follow her as she slowly starts realizing just how abusive her relationship is and then starts working towards leaving this relationship. Overall, the audiobook is 100% the route you want to take when picking up this story. The audiobook is phenomenal. The narrator does an amazing job narrating the story. Like, I feel like her voice is the perfect voice for this story. It was just done so, so, so well. Y'all just have to read it. Y'all just have to pick it up and read it because it is so wonderful. And like, it feels weird to talk about a book that is so much about abuse as wonderful, but it's just so well written is my point. Now let's get on to the actual books that are on my top 10 list. Now I'm going to talk about these in completely random order, but I will try to first talk about the ones that made it onto the list more because I remember that I really enjoyed them versus feeling as strongly about them at the moment. But I know that if I were to reread every single book in this top 10 list, I would be absolutely obsessed and in love with it all over again. And once again, I say the problem here is my memory, not the books. So the first one is A Fat Chance Charlie Vega. Now, this is a YA contemporary. It's about this fat girl who is living with her mother, who is like diet obsessed and is really trying to get her to start a diet. and it's also about her falling in love, having this crush on this popular guy, but figuring out if that guy is actually the one for her. It's also about friendship. She has this really strong but complicated friendship with her best friend, and overall, my Puerto Rican ass loved this story about a Puerto Rican teenager. It was really, really, really good. It has one of the best love interests I have ever read in any age range. Like young adult, children, adult. No one, I think, can overcome Brian in Fat Chance Charlie Vega, okay? He was everything. So, of course, I had to mention the book. The next one is kind of silly, but it's on here because I read it twice. I felt the urge to read it a third time, and the only reason I didn't was because time just got away from me, and that is Binding a Page. Now, this is a very, very silly, but also kind of dark, vampire novella that just warmed its way into my heart. Is the quality outstanding? No. Is it a fucking delight to read? Yes, and I probably will keep rereading it because I find such comfort in it. And again, I don't know why, because one of the characters is literally coming out of a really super toxic relationship, and somehow I am incredibly comforted by the story. I guess that's just something you need to understand about me, that for me, in the end, if I feel warm and fuzzy feelings, the whole reading experience is warm and fuzzy feelings for me, even if there was a chunk of like, oh man, that's so sad. That is how I work. And so, in essence, the novella is about this guy who recently got turned into a vampire, and he's basically being introduced into vampire society, but someone is basically trying to... It's more than a prank, but less than blackmail. So somewhere in that neat middle ground, they're trying to mess with him, basically. And so when he goes to his room, he finds this guy who's like starving, naked, and he's like, what on earth is happening? And so they're trying to coerce them to get together, but eventually they just decide to choose to be together anyway. It's really, 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 really good. I would highly recommend it if you want some vampire smut that has some angst, but also is funny and fluffy. It's right here. It's right here. The next one is The Prophets. This is a literary historical fiction that is set during the antebellum period, and it follows these two queer men who are in love while living in a plantation. And it's a very, very, very harrowing story, and we see them through the perspective of different people who live in the plantation. And wow, it was phenomenal. The writing was so beautiful and rich, and even though I don't feel like I understood everything that the author was putting down for me, it didn't matter because I still saw the beauty and heartbreak of this story, and I adored it. Historical fiction is not usually my jam, but this right here ticks all the boxes for me, okay? It was queer, it had beautiful writing, it had a lot left unsaid for the reader to figure out. It just, so good. So phenomenal. The next one is Meet Cute Diary. Now, listen right here. I will champion this book until I die, I think. I understand completely why people don't love it. Like, I understand, okay? It's not for everyone. But I will defend my annoying, selfish son until I die. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. So essentially in this story, we follow this trans boy who runs this blog of like trans meet cutes, and someone exposes him for basically being a fraud, for the stories being fake, and so he gets in cahoots with this other boy to try to fabricate a romance that is actually real, and then it spirals from there as he tries to maintain the credibility of his blog. I absolutely love this book because I love how flawed the main character was. He just felt so real, and I adore a story that has an incredibly realistic main character. Like, I was so impressed that for a debut novel, this had such a strong protagonist, because the character work for me was impeccable. And yes, was the protagonist insufferable? Yes, and that is exactly how I love him. I love him for who he is, and I do think that we saw enough of him growing and showing hints that he knows that he has work to do and that he will do it. It's just gonna be rough because it is for everyone. It's hard for all of us to grow and change and become better people. So I love Meet Cute Diary. The next book is After the Storm. This is for sure my favorite romance of the year. The way I want to reread this like 500-page romance, that is not a statement that naturally comes out of this mouth. Okay? I do not like long romances. I don't. They're not my thing. I usually find that they drag out too much, that not enough happens, that I'm like, can we get to the action? But once again, what has happened here? The perfect combination for me, which is essentially a character study and a lot of character-driven narrative. I will always be a hoe for that, okay? Like, that is just my perfect kind of story. And so I absolutely love this, I guess, sci-fi romance. It's more like dystopia, futuristic kind of setting where this guy worked at this ship that was full of very unsavory people, and so eventually the members of that ship get disbanded and sent to different ships, and so he's trying to rehabilitate from his experiences in that terrible place. And through the process, he meets some lovely men and has very, very different, unique, and beautiful relationships with them. And I'm obsessed with it. I need to reread it. I need to read the little novella that came out that I have not bought yet, because I like to commit crimes against myself and make myself unhappy by not reading things that I know will bring me joy. Anyway, that aside, I will continue to hype up this book because it deserves all the hype. It deserves all the hype. And if you really think you can get into a character study that is all about this guy dealing with his trauma and falling in love, look no further. You can have this 500-page monstrosity. The next book I'm going to be talking about is more a series as a whole kind of situation, and it is the manga series Blue Flag. Of course, this was going to be on here, okay? Like, there was no way I was not going to talk about Blue Flag on this video, because Blue Flag took over my life. It made me feel so many human emotions that literally I almost cried on camera, and I hate crying where anyone at all can see me. So literally, what a moment. In essence, this is a series where we follow these 4 teenagers who have unrequited crushes on each other. Basically, everyone is in love with the wrong person, and there's a lot of tension and angst, but ultimately they all love each other very, very, very much and just want happiness and joy for each other. And it was delightful. Absolutely everyone should read this. Like, honestly, 2021 was the year of manga for me, and I'm just starting to realize that there are so many gems in manga that are not talked about nearly enough in the broader booktube community, and that is truly offensive and sad because there really are some phenomenal stories, and this one is definitely one of them. It's just, these babies will live with me for a very, very long time in my heart and soul because they are just precious, and I want only good for them, only ever good for them. Now, the next book is Split Tooth. This is another one that it's like, what do I know about this? Can I summarize it? I think not. It's just one of those stories that is just, there's so much to unpack that it's hard to summarize that in any concise way, okay? But I think it's like a mix of autobiography with fiction. There's like different terms for that I cannot recall at this moment, but it is about this young indigenous woman who goes through a lot of trauma and is trying to process that trauma, and it is written so phenomenally. If you listen to the audiobook, there's Inuit throat singing, and it just adds to the tension and beauty of the story. It's just, y'all should check it out. Like, y'all will not understand the reading experience until you have done it yourself. So you should just do it. You should just pick it up and be like, I am ready to have an experience, a moment, a reading full body takeover, essentially. Now, the next book is one that snuck up on me. Like, I knew I enjoyed it, but did I think it was going to be in my top 10? Originally, no. But then literally it lives in my mind rent free. Like, I cannot stop thinking about it. Whenever I see anyone asking for recommendations, regardless of who the person is, I want to tell them to read this book. So clearly it did something for me that I need to stop pretending like it did not. And that is Black Sun. I love this fantasy book so much. It is a revenge story. We follow, at least in my eyes, we follow 3 main characters. There's a 4th disposable character that we're not going to talk about. But we follow 3 main characters who may or may not have opposite goals, and who may or may not be villainous in some ways, and who you may or may not root for, even as they have different goals. And I'm absolutely obsessed with this. The way I would risk it all for Serapio and Narampa and Shiala, they are everything to me. I know it's an unpopular opinion to like Narampa, but I fucking love her. Do I love Shiala and Serapio more? Yes, but that does not mean that I do not love Narampa, okay? I just loved following all of these characters. The way the author weaved together their different goals in such a way that you understand where each character is coming from, and if you like them enough, you want to root for them despite their contradicting goals. That's just true power for me right there. That is true power for me right there. And so I need everyone to read this fantasy series. And I need the second book so bad. I need it so bad. And I need it to be good so bad as well. Like, the way this first book ended. Crimes were committed, but I need the second book. It has a hideous cover. We're not going to talk about it any further. All you need to know is that this book lives in my mind rent free. The characters live in my mind rent free, okay? Like, it is difficult for me to remember the names of characters without prompting. But I remember Narampa, Serapio, and Shiala as if I had read their story yesterday. Okay? So that's all I need to say. That is everything you need to know. The next book I'm going to be talking about is The Mirror Season. Now, the way... How can I even talk about this book? Okay. I keep looking away from the camera as I'm filming this video because the emotions are too strong. Maybe I will find them in the ceiling. Maybe I will find the words to talk about these books on the ceiling because it is so hard. But in this one, we follow this girl who was assaulted at this party along with another boy, and she is not dealing with that situation well at all. And so she starts getting close to the other boy who was assaulted at this same party. And as the story progresses, you learn that she may know more about the situation than she is letting on. And so it is a very complex, difficult story about these two characters who have gone through a similar experience, falling in love even through the utter heartbreak of what they went through, basically. In essence, I cannot put to words how much I loved this book. It was just phenomenal. The writing, listen, for me, this book is everything I want an Anna Marie McLemore book to be. And that is because it has the perfect mix for me of magic and reality. The writing is beautiful, but it doesn't feel superfluous. It feels beautiful but grounded in reality. While other books by this author, which I adore and am obsessed with, and I do not mind the super purple prose, but other books by this author are a little bit more difficult to grasp, I guess, because the language is so purple. But this one is just that perfect mix where you can get everything that's being said while at the same time appreciating how beautifully it is said. And in general, I just love me a heartbreaking story, but also a story full of joy, because the reality is that even though these characters go through so much, this is actually a story about joy, about finding joy and being joyful. It's wonderful. It's just so wonderful. And then the last book on this list is The Only Good Indians. Let's take a moment to grasp that I have a horror novel in my top 10 list. This is part of why I wanted to start a horror book club, because literally in this year I read a few horror novels that left me like, wow, horror really could be serving such good food for me, and I have been ignoring it. And The Only Good Indians is where it really started for me, where I was like, wow, I can read something that is truly horrific, heartbreaking, gory, and be like, this is now my entire life. This is now my everything. This consumes all of my thoughts. Like, literally, between Black Sun and The Only Good Indians, these are the two books that come back and back and back again to my thoughts again and again and again. How do I talk about this book? In essence, it is the story of these group of young Indigenous men who went on a hunting trip they were not supposed to go on, and when they are older, they are haunted by an elk spirit. Elkhead woman, I think, is what she is called in the book. And you read about all the horrifying things that happen to them, and it just crawls under your skin. It is upsetting, disturbing, and beautiful in the end. It's so beautiful in the end. Man, it is such a wonderful novel. This is where my obsession with Stephen Graham Jones began, and I do not see it ending anytime soon. So just read this. If you haven't read it already, please read it. I am such a Stephen Graham Jones stan now that literally at the bookstore where my parents live, the booksellers started buying more copies of his books because I went and bought some. And as soon as they started buying the copies, they started selling a lot. And now I'm like, yes, please, please, please allow the people to read Stephen Graham Jones. It's just, let me pull it back. Let me rein it in. I don't think my words are that coherent at all about this book and about several of the books on this list, but just know that I loved every single book featured in this video, and I loved so many other stories that I read this year, and I just wish I had better words to speak about them and to get y'all to read these books. But for now, I guess just take my word for it. Just take my word for it and check out these books because they're so worth it. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you would like to follow me on any of my social media, I will have the links to that down below in the description. But for now, see you next time.